Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Human Hormones 101 with Dr. Abigail Seaver. My name is Vasi. I'm founder of the Thrive community. We support each other in every aspect of thriving. The focus is a lot about overcoming addictive patterns such as stress eating, emotional eating, and also releasing excess weight. That's kind of our focus, but we really branch out into every aspect of thriving. I like to say we work on thriving every day and in every way. Um, so yeah, everybody's welcome to check it out. The link to join is in the chat if you would like to. And I'm super excited to have here Dr. Abigail Seaver. Many of you already know her. She's a naturopath in Ridgeway, and she's here to talk to us all about human hormones. And I'm going to turn the floor over to you, Dr. Abigail, to introduce yourself more and share with us about hormones.
Thank you so much, Vasi. So yes, Vasi and I had the opportunity to put on the Thriving Gut series last fall and had a great time producing that series together. And it was a fantastic combination of education and guided visualizations. And I think a lot of you enjoyed that. So we're going to continue with some education about hormones. And so I am a naturopathic doctor. I've been in practice for 21 years, and I specialize in balancing hormones and healing digestive conditions. It looks like some of you may be unmuted. So if you can mute yourself, that would be fantastic. And then when we conclude the talk part of the evening, then there will be a time for questions. So, and I may actually ask for audience participation as we go along as well. So, but right at the moment, if you could mute yourself, that would be fantastic. So, as I said, I specialize in balancing hormones and healing the digestion. I also have a general family practice, and I'm located physically in Ridgeway, Colorado, but I see folks from all over the Southwest, so all over the region, and do work with patients via telemedicine. So let me know if you're outside the region and you'd like to work with me. So, we are going to talk about hormones tonight, and this is one of my favorite topics. I absolutely love endocrinology. It's my favorite area of medicine, and endocrinology is basically the study of hormones and the glands that produce the hormones called endocrine glands. And so, does anyone have any endocrine glands that they could just name off the top of their head that they are familiar with? Any hormone producing glands that you can think of? Just either type it in the chat or you can unmute yourself and just tune in, pipe up.
The adrenal glands.
Adrenal glands, exactly. Yeah. So Stephanie said thyroid, ovaries, testes, hypothalamus, pituitary. Yes. So those are all examples of endocrine glands. So hormone producing glands. We actually have over um, testes, says Jamie. Yes. So we have multiple glands located in the brain and also in the body that produce over 50 different hormones. And those hormones are chemical messengers. So these are tiny compounds that are smaller than proteins that send signals from the originating gland to other glands, other organs, and other tissues. And those hormones will bind to receptor sites on the tissues that they are affecting and exert an effect. And that effect may range from stimulating the release of another hormone, or it may cause the stimulation of, let's say, growth, or it may stimulate the down regulation or decrease of the output of a hormone, or may can do many different things essentially. So can stimulate the output of another substance from the body, So those chemical messengers send signals that exert an effect that can result in many different outcomes. And so one of these examples, or one example, is that thyroid hormone T4 may increase body temperature, and insulin will escort glucose or blood sugar into a muscle cell. So those are just some examples of what hormones can do. Hormones also work in groups or they can work together. So two or more hormones can work together to exert a larger effect. And examples of this are thyroid and human growth hormone work together to help a child grow and develop and become larger. Or let's say melatonin and cortisol work together to regulate your sleep and wake cycles. So it's not just one hormone acting on its own. In many cases, there are multiple hormones working together to exert a more substantial effect. And hormonal output can change. It can change over a lifetime. So, for instance, your output of ovarian or testicular hormones may decline over your lifetime. But hormonal output can also change throughout the day. And for example, cortisol levels are high in the morning and then they decline and they're very low at night. And this is a cyclical thing that happens every single day. Melatonin is another hormone that has a cyclical daily output that changes substantially, where it's high at night when you're sleeping and then very low during the day. So hormone levels are not always steady. They're not always exactly the same. They can change and shift, and they can change and shift depending upon other factors in your environment. So, hormones, I touched on this previously a little bit, operate on feedback loops where if there is too much hormone in your system or in your bloodstream, that endocrine producing organ will receive a signal to decrease output. So it's just a very sensitive and elegant and complex system. And there's a lot to it. And I'm going to try not to get too technical here tonight. I'm going to try to keep it very practical so that you can use this information right away and understand it. So let's talk about some specific endocrine organs and the hormones they produce and what those things do in the body. I'm going to start with insulin and blood sugar because blood sugar balance affects every system in your body and can have very profound effects, positive and negative. So, I mentioned briefly that insulin is made in the pancreas and it carries blood sugar or glucose into your tissues. Number one, to use for fuel, but also to lower blood sugar levels in the bloodstream so that high blood sugar levels don't cause too much damage. And so high blood sugar, if it is just left elevated and uncorrected because you're not producing enough insulin for some reason, can create inflammation, can create blood vessel and tissue damage, can contribute to many other chronic diseases, obesity, um, dementia. I think I mentioned that. So when blood sugar is poorly balanced, that has many effects downstream. And we will talk about some practical tips to keep blood sugar in balance. And then below that, I think about the adrenals. So the adrenals are small glands that sit on top of the kidneys, and they produce multiple hormones. Probably the most important and well known is called cortisol. And a lot of us think about cortisol as the stress hormone. So cortisol is produced in large amounts when we're under acute stress, and it helps us to be able to act and to have the energy and the wherewithal to get through that stressor, manage that stressor, um, be able to have the energy to run away from the thing that's chasing us, to tackle that project and get it done. Um, but high levels of cortisol, if they continue to remain high, can cause damage as well. And so high cortisol can contribute to inflammation, can contribute to obesity, can contribute to increased risk for diabetes. Um, and over time, if you are under stress for a prolonged period of time, let's say you're taking care of an aging parent, or you have a someone in your family has a health crisis and you have to remain just on for days and weeks and months on end, and you're not sleeping and you're not taking good care of yourself, and your stress levels are very high. Over time, your ability to make enough cortisol, to put out enough cortisol, really can diminish. And you can end up with a different problem, which is associated with very low cortisol, and that can contribute to fatigue, to increased risk for infection, for bone density loss. So there can be a problem with overproduction or underproduction of cortisol, and there is a stress component to it, whether it's acute stress or it's chronic prolonged stress. The other hormone I like to talk about in terms of adrenal function is DHEA. And DHEA is a hormone that's made by the adrenals that is naturally converted by the body into estrogen and testosterone. So it's used as a source of those hormones throughout our lifetime, but women especially rely on it really as we go into menopause. And I like to support adrenal function as you're heading into your late 30s, early 40s, because as your ovarian production of hormones declines, your reliance upon your adrenal glands' production of DHEA to make some estrogen and testosterone for you becomes very important. And your output of DHEA kind of depends upon your adrenal health and your stress levels. So, as I mentioned with cortisol, if you're chronically under stress, if there's been a prolonged period of time where you're not sleeping, you're dealing with a very stressful situation that's just ongoing, your ability to put out enough DHEA to provide those hormones for you as you go into menopause is really diminished. And so you're kind of starting from a level of hormone, like a hormonal supply situation that's somewhat diminished. And so you might experience more significant perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms as a result. So we'll talk about some things that could help to support that at the end of the talk as well. Um, and then I wanted to discuss thyroid. So the thyroid gland is a butterfly-shaped gland at the base of the neck here that puts out a hormone called T4. And T4 is a hormone that is then converted to another thyroid hormone called T3 in your tissues that is the active form of your thyroid hormone. And any thoughts on what thyroid hormone does for us? Has many different effects that are extremely important. So anyone want to speak up or type in the chat some effects that the thyroid hormone has? So Diane says metabolism, that's correct. Melissa says energy, that's right. So thyroid hormone, temperature control, immune function, says Stephanie. Yes, that's right. So thyroid hormone has a huge effect on your metabolism. So the rate at which you are basically burning fuel, burning calories. It also regulates your body temperature, whether you're chilly or too hot. And if your thyroid function is low, you may feel chilly. If your thyroid function is overactive or too high, You might feel hot or have sweats. It is also affecting your heart rate. So if your thyroid function is overactive, your heart rate may go too high. And then thyroid, as I mentioned briefly previously, is involved in your ability to grow, so your growth rate, and as I think Melissa stated, your energy level. So if thyroid function or thyroid hormone output is low, you may feel fatigue. That may be one of your most common symptoms. So at the end of the talk, we're going to discuss some things that could support thyroid. And then let's move to ovarian and testicular hormones. So I'm going to talk about ovarian hormones first. The one that we all know about and think about is estrogen. It's a key hormone for women. It's also essential for men in smaller amounts, but in women, estrogen helps to regulate the menstrual cycle. It's essential for our ability to reproduce. And as we age, as estrogen levels naturally decline, we may miss it because it helps us with our energy level, with our cognitive function, with our ability to regulate our body temperature, with our ability to maintain our bone density and our cardiovascular health. Also just the texture of our skin and maintaining our waistline and our weight are affected by estrogen. Also our mood. So for women, estrogen is a really key hormone. Um, and we'll discuss it as it relates to the other hormones in just a moment, but just wanted to mention that. And then progesterone is the other most important hormone made by women's ovaries that is produced primarily in the second half of the menstrual cycle. So approximately day 14 to day 28 of the menstrual cycle, progesterone levels rise quite high, and progesterone prepares the uterine lining for implantation. So if you get pregnant, progesterone has helped to prepare the lining of the uterus for pregnancy. It also helps to maintain a pregnancy. So if you're not producing enough progesterone, it's hard to maintain a pregnancy and you might have a miscarriage. Progesterone naturally has a calming effect on the nervous system. So if it's lacking, you may feel more anxious or more irritable, or you may have trouble sleeping. And women often experience that in perimenopause and menopause as their progesterone levels decline. They have less of that calming influence from the progesterone. So you may feel like PMS is much worse. You may feel more anxious for no apparent reason, more irritable or even angry, or may have trouble sleeping. So that is a common effect from declining progesterone, and that can start as early as early 40s. And then testosterone is made by both the ovaries and the testes. So in women, we make small amounts of testosterone in our ovaries. And the effect that the testosterone has on us is not necessarily related to our menstrual cycle, but it is important for maintaining our bone density, maintaining our muscle mass as we age, maintaining our energy and cognitive function and motivation, and also our libido. And I would say in men, um, all of those features would be the same. And in addition, in men, testosterone is important for reproduction and sperm health. But in men, men make much higher amounts of testosterone, and for them, it does play a major role in their mental health. So mood, also motivation, cognitive function, muscle mass, bone density, and libido. Um, so what causes or what might contribute to a hormone imbalance. So does anyone have any thoughts on um, what environmental or lifestyle aspects might contribute to a hormone imbalance? Melissa said stress. Yes, absolutely. Any other thoughts? Contraceptives, diet. Yes, absolutely. So medications can affect your hormone balance. Your diet could affect your hormone balance. Absolutely. So, um, the most important, or the thing that I always start with, um, most important thing that I think contributes to hormone imbalance is poor blood sugar control. So we don't often think about this, because if you're not diabetic, you figure you're fine. That if your blood tests are showing that your glucose is normal and your hemoglobin A1C is normal, that you aren't affected by blood sugar imbalance, you might be wrong about that. So um, we can experience hormonal imbalance as a result of a more subtle blood sugar problem. And we can get clues about that from running the blood test called hemoglobin A1C. So it might be within the normal range, but it might be on the upper end of the normal range or just slightly above the upper end of the normal range. That test shows us gives us a snapshot, or not a snapshot, but a great view of the last 3 months of your blood sugar balance. So all the ups and downs are kind of averaged into a number, and that number tells us how well you've been controlling your blood sugar over the prior 3 months. And if your blood sugar control number is on the upper end of the normal range or a little bit above the normal range, even though it's not a cause for alarm in terms of diabetes, it may be contributing to poor blood sugar control. And so, what can we do about that? We can really limit our intake of sugars and refined carbohydrates. So anything that's sweetened, sweetened foods, sweetened beverages, and then things made with white flour. So white bagels, white pasta, white crackers, pizza crust, all of that. Also alcohol can really dysregulate the blood sugar. And when I find that folks really tighten up their blood sugar control through improved diet. Also, exercise can improve blood sugar control, especially going for a walk after a meal, or Vasi's putting in the chat that intermittent fasting can really improve blood sugar control. That's absolutely right. And we've talked about intermittent fasting quite a bit in some of our other talks. So these things can actually significantly improve hormone balance, even without giving actual hormones. So balancing the blood sugar is a fantastic way to get started balancing hormones, even if you don't think you have diabetes, or you know you don't have diabetes. You may want to look at your diet and your lifestyle to see how you can improve your blood sugar control. So I often see women who are experiencing sleep disturbance, hot flashes, night sweats. Once we start working on their diet and get their blood sugar control really tightened up, oftentimes those symptoms really diminish. And that's before I've given them any estrogen or any herbs or anything else. So it can be quite profound. Um, the next thing that I like to address to balance hormones without giving hormones is to look at stress. and cortisol levels. And we can test for that. So there is a saliva test that's a very sensitive way at looking at adrenal hormone output and cortisol hormone levels. And so that can give us some insights, but oftentimes we can tell that there's a major stress component just by looking at how stressed you're feeling in your lifestyle and how things are going in your life. So if you're feeling very overwhelmed, if there's way too much going on in your life, some of this is out of your control, then we work on helping to manage stress the best we can by making sure that you're getting good sleep, by making sure that you're exercising regularly, getting mental health support, creating healthy boundaries in your life, doing what we can to manage stress so that it doesn't have a significant impact on your hormone levels. Sometimes there are things that are out of our control, but there are always some aspects of our life that are within our control, and we can make changes to help ourselves better manage stress or reduce our load, essentially. And Vasi is saying that meditation and guided imagery um, can be very helpful in managing stress, and I would agree with that. There are a lot of tools, so ranging from meditation, guided imaging, working with a therapist, being in nature, um, long, slow walks in nature are one of my favorite things. Jamie says yoga, yoga, yoga. Yes, yes, yes. Yoga is a fantastic way to help your body manage stress and to put you into a more we talked about this in one of my other talks recently, a parasympathetic dominant nervous system, so that you can actually rest and not feel like you're in a fight or flight mode all the time. So sometimes managing or balancing hormones can also be as simple as getting stress levels under control and finding ways to manage stress. Because as we discussed, the hormone output from the adrenals is going to be key as you're going into perimenopause and menopause. And also for men, I would say, even though there is a decline in testosterone over time, it's much more gradual than it is for women in terms of hormonal change as we age. But DHEA output for men is very important as their testosterone naturally declines. And so managing stress in men and helping men to be able to produce enough DHEA from their adrenal glands can be a big help because DHEA converts to testosterone. So you're able to get some of that. And Vasi is saying, do you recommend a DHEA supplement as we age? Sometimes I do. Yeah, sometimes I do. So if it seems like we're doing everything we can to reduce stress and support a healthy lifestyle, we're eating well, we're exercising, we are creating healthy boundaries, we're doing yoga, we're doing our meditation, but yet we're still experiencing some of those symptoms of declining testosterone, for instance. Then DHEA can be used as it's a hormone. So it is considered part of hormone replacement therapy because we're replacing the hormone that we normally would be making in the adrenal glands. But yes, I do sometimes supplement with DHEA and I do find it helpful for both men and women. And then another thing to think about in terms of what could be causing hormone imbalance, like a hidden cause that we might not think about, that we can have an effect on and can do something about, is environmental toxicity. So environmental toxins actually have a huge impact on our hormonal balance in this day and age. It's sad to say, but we have many endocrine disrupting chemicals in our environment. So these are chemicals that can partially bind to our estrogen receptor sites, for instance, and exert a mild estrogenic effect. And some of these compounds are found in plastics, some of them are found in herbicides and pesticides. There are heavy metals in our environment that can affect our endocrine system. And so, if we are trying everything we can to get our hormones balanced and we're not quite getting there, sometimes we will look at environmental toxicity. And we can do some general things to reduce our exposure, like filtering our water and buying organic food as much as possible, avoiding the use of herbicides and pesticides and chemicals like cleaning chemicals in the home, or commercially produced makeup and body care products that contain chemicals. So we can do our best to avoid those. We can also sweat through exercise or sauna to get some of those chemicals out. We can eat cruciferous vegetables like broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage to help our liver to clear some of the toxins. Um, but beyond that, if we're still struggling with hormone balance, we can actually test for environmental toxicity. I will often order a urine test to check heavy metal levels and then levels of environmental toxins like herbicides, pesticides, plastic compounds, um, petroleum products to see what we're excreting in the urine, which reflects what's in our body. And then we undergo a detox to clear those chemicals. So oftentimes, addressing environmental chemicals can have a can have a big effect on hormone balance and hormone output. And that's something that we don't often think about. And then we talked about this quite a bit with our Thriving Gut series, but the gut microbiome, surprise, surprise, has a huge impact on our hormone balance. So when the gut microbiome is off, so the balance of those microbes, the balance of the bacteria in the large intestine and to a smaller extent, the small intestine, um, are not abundant enough. So the variety is not as abundant as it should be. The numbers in total are too low of those beneficial bacteria. Or there's an overgrowth of the wrong bacteria or yeast or fungus or parasites, amoeba. So if the gut is off in any of those ways, it's going to be very hard for us to balance our hormones. And we talked about that to some extent in their Thriving Gut series, but it is a significant phenomenon, and it's something that we can address in our diet, in our lifestyle by also filtering our water so that the chlorine in our tap water isn't killing off all of our beneficial bacteria. We can eat fermented foods, naturally fermented foods. We can eat foods that are rich in prebiotic fiber that promote the health of our good gut bacteria, like onions and garlic and leeks and beans and asparagus and artichokes, apples, pears, bananas. There are a number of things that are rich in those prebiotic fibers that promote the health and happiness of the beneficial bacteria, which therefore can promote the health and happiness of our hormonal balance and our endocrine system. We can also do specialty testing to look at what's going on in your gut. We can do a specialty stool test to look at your numbers and types of beneficial bacteria, and then look for any pathogens, any abnormal bacteria, yeast, parasites, worms, etc., and treat that so that we can bring that back into balance. So the gut microbiome does play a big role in our hormone balance, and can be really thrown off or damaged by our modern diet. So in some of our prior classes, we talked about the fact that Sugar and sweetened foods can be damaging to the gut microbiome. Simple carbohydrates like white flour products, alcohol. I know this is all sounding familiar to you. Also, certain chemical emulsifiers found in certain foods like commercially made ice creams and some salad dressings can damage the microbiome. So oftentimes it's a matter of looking at the diet, cleaning up the diet. That can be a great place to start. So a couple of other things I just wanted to mention that can affect our ability to keep our hormones balanced are being underweight or overweight. So being underweight or overweight presents their own problems with hormones. So with underweight, we may not be able to make enough, so proper amounts of our hormones. We might end up with low levels of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone if we are underweight. And then if we are overweight, we can end up with higher levels, or we may just simply have higher levels of um, blood glucose because our blood sugar balance is not great. We may have higher levels of cortisol, and there is a correlation between being overweight and having a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome. And it's not necessarily being overweight that causes it. The syndrome itself can contribute to too much weight, but there is a hormone imbalance that's connected to that, to the excess weight. So and women who are overweight and women who are underweight can both have trouble getting pregnant for different reasons. So there can be a weight connection. And then over and under exercising can affect hormone balance. So too much exercise is read by the body as high stress. So it's a lot of stress on the body to over exercise, and that can have its downstream effects, including perhaps too much cortisol output to begin with, and then resulting in chronically low cortisol and low DHEA, and perhaps low estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone output because of the stress on the body that the overexercising produces. And then underexercising can result in primarily poor blood sugar control. So I wanted to mention that as well as things that can influence hormone balance. So we've already talked about a number of tips that could be beneficial to address some of these causes of hormone imbalance. I just wanted to look at my notes briefly to see if there was anything else that I had written down that I wanted to share with you. Yeah, I think in addition to what we talked about for stress management, sleep hygiene and really dialing in sleep is key. So if you are chronically sleep deprived for weeks and months, that will result in oftentimes in a hormone imbalance because it is perceived as a stress on the body. And there are many things we can do to improve your sleep quality. And if you need help, let me know. I have a lot of tricks up my sleeve in that sense. Um, Also limiting screen time. So screens and electronic exposure is a stress upon the body as well. And I kind of lump that into the category of what can we do to improve adrenal function and balance your stress response. One of the things that we can do is to limit screen time. So those were some of the tips that I had for how to just practically with diet and lifestyle address some of these things that might cause hormone imbalance. And this is a huge topic, so I could keep talking and give you a lot more information, but I just wanted to open it up to questions now, and then we are going to move to a guided meditation with Vasi.
I had a quick question, and yeah, thank you so much for sharing all that information. It's a lot, but it's really interesting to think about how they all work together. How would you recommend we tell if we're over exercising or under exercising? Do you have any ideas, tips, or tricks around that?
Yeah, so um, oftentimes we can tell that you are over exercising if you are losing weight and not intending to lose weight. So if you are at a healthy weight and you're exercising to the level where you're losing weight, that is a concern, and that can result in decreased hormone output. Um, I would say that it depends upon the type of exercise and how often you're engaging in it, um, as to how much, but oftentimes when a patient comes in and we start talking about it, just the intensity and the frequency and the length, if it's alarming to me, then I will mention it, especially if the patient is seeing me for a hormone imbalance. So let's say you're training to run a marathon or an ultra marathon and you're running, you know, 10 to 15 miles a day and you're struggling to keep weight on and you might be experiencing some symptoms of low hormones, then that might be a time that I would say, you know what, it seems like you're over exercising. Maybe we need to regroup after you run that race that you want to run, and then we'll back it off and see if we can get your hormone levels, in a good place. So I would say there isn't any specific number of minutes or hours, or any specific type of exercise that's not indicated. It completely depends upon the person too. So some people seem to be able to tolerate pretty heavy exercise and really thrive on it and don't suffer from it. And then for others, it may be too much. So everyone needs to find their own balance, and I can help with that. So Melissa is saying, can you say more about bone density and hormonal imbalance? Yes, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, testosterone is a hormone that's necessary for maintaining bone density and increasing bone density, but as are estrogen and progesterone. So, as women and men see their hormonal output of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone decline naturally as we age, we naturally see a decline in bone density as well. So, some of us are able to maintain our bone density more effectively or for a longer period of time because we have either good adrenal function and good adrenal output of DHEA that can convert to estrogen and testosterone for us. Or in men, we may maintain a good testosterone output from our testes over many years, and it doesn't decline as much as it does for some. Um, but if we have kind of a typical North American menopause for a woman where our estrogen and progesterone and testosterone levels kind of drop off a cliff at age 51 and we go immediately into menopause, then we will see a corresponding decrease in our bone density. And so there are natural ways that we can work on that. And then there are hormonal treatments for it as well. So sometimes hormonal treatments are beneficial.